The debate over the federal minimum wage has strong arguments on both sides. Democrats say the distribution of wealth in this country is far too top-heavy, and that's a problem, and they're right. What they're wrong about is raising the minimum wage to try and fix it. Right now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Democrats want to more than double that to $15 by 2025. It's a big, big rise. The bipartisan Congressional Budget Office says it would pull 1.3 million people above the poverty line. Good news, but could cost more than 3 million jobs. Very bad news. Right there, as you see, it would do more harm than good. And we are just getting started on this topic. The noise around this subject has been loud for years. Remember the fight for 15, all the fast food workers in major U.S. cities? Bernie Sanders has long been a major proponent of this.
We must never lose sight of the fact that over half of the workers in America today, the richest country in the history of the world, are living paycheck to paycheck.
All right, at a time when small businesses are closing at record pace all across the country, Joe Biden decided to throw the $15 minimum wage into his COVID recovery plan. He had literally just finished talking about the pain that small businesses were suffering through, and then he said this.
Look, our recovery plan also calls for an increase in the minimum wage at least $15 an hour.
All right, small businesses are dying or on life support after 10 months of COVID closures. So what's the Biden plan? To any business miraculously surviving COVID, let's skyrocket their cost of doing business. It's almost like a bad joke. But Biden and Democrats don't care about small businesses. Major corporations are what fund the DNC. They'll be just fine. They can easily absorb this wage hike. But the guy running the local hardware store in your town, better look out. The ironic part is that the demands are coming from major cities that don't even have to worry about this. In California right now, the minimum wage this year is $14. That's up $1 from last year. By 2025, they'll likely be way above 15 anyway. It's one of many reasons that businesses, of course, are fleeing California. D.C. already at 15 at this point. New York at $12.50. You can see it here every year, though. They go up, they increase, and will be at 15 by 2025. Rand Paul said it best here.
Some of the people have also argued that they made their minimum wage too high, which you need to hear about in California, because it's having a big heart and a small brain problem.
It's true. It's another liberal policy that'll make the left feel good while doing more damage than anything else. Throw it on the pile along with government-run health care and the Green New Deal. The places a $15 minimum wage will actually affect are the states that aren't making any noise about this. Red states with smaller populations, that's where the minimum wage is going to double. That's where the jobs will be lost. That's where the small businesses will get further crushed. And then there's the ripple effect. Let's say that this gets passed, and yay, the lowest wage in America is now $15 per hour. Guess how much the average high school teacher makes in the state of Florida right now? $33,000 per year, according to ZipRecruiter. In North Carolina, it's $34,000. State of Mississippi, $32,800. Now guess how much $15 per hour is on an annual salary. $31,200 per year. Imagine the mutiny public officials will have on their hands the next day after this thing gets passed. Teachers will be demanding a hefty raise, and rightly so. They went to college, they worked hard, and on an hourly basis, they'll just be making 50 cents more per hour than a 16-year-old flipping burgers at Wendy's. Can you imagine? States would be forced to raise teachers' wages up to an average of at least $40,000 a year. So now what would happen is you'd have teachers in Mississippi making about the same as teachers in New York and California, where a house can cost twice as much and taxes are way higher. Now those teachers in California, New York, all the other places, those teachers are screaming. They're furious. How can you expect to pay teachers in New York and California the same as teachers in Mississippi and Florida, where the cost of living and the taxes are so much lower? You see where this is going. Imagine this in every sector all throughout the country. It's going to be a disaster. But what about red state businesses? Well, it'll be another devastating move against restaurants, which are already struggling. Restaurants operate at very tight margins when times are good. And the much more obvious reality is raising the minimum wage will force businesses in all sectors to cut staff. Realistically, many will have to work harder to get that wage because they're going to have to be doing the jobs that others did before they got laid off, their coworkers. Then comes the other problem, and that's inflation. Let's look at fast food. In the Midwest, you can grab dinner at a fast food restaurant, Wendy's, McDonald's, wherever, $5-6. People inside making $7-8 an hour. What do you think happens to the price of a Whopper in Indiana when the franchise owner is forced to double the pay of every single employee? Or, for that matter, the state of Wyoming. Here's Senator John Barrasso.
President Biden is calling on this body to vote to double the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, maybe the president's idea of national unity is national uniformity, but that doesn't work in Wyoming or for the people of Wyoming.
What will be interesting to watch is what Democrats from smaller states think of this idea. Congressmen, senators, stuff like that. Let's try to answer that question with Heather Zumaraga. She's a financial analyst and the president of Zuma Global, also the author of The Man's Guide to Corporate Culture. Heather, good to see you.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, yeah. So what do you think the $15 minimum wage play, how does that play with Democrats from smaller conservative states? Let's take Joe Manchin in West Virginia. What will he think of this?
Oh, I don't think Joe Manchin of West Virginia will go for this. He was also against the $2,000 stimulus checks, if you recall. So buried in the COVID relief bill is that $15 per hour minimum wage hike. And it's really ironic because on one hand, you have the government trying to help small businesses get through the pandemic with tens of billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, they're making it so that small businesses who have already been really hit really hard by COVID, that they can't afford their payroll. It's definitely not a good time to do it. We all want wages to increase for Americans, but that should come from the private sector. Like you said, $15 an hour in Kentucky or Georgia or Iowa is a lot different than $15 an hour in New York or California, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And that's what's so funny. When you try to federalize, we're a nation of different states, and we're so different in so many ways. When they try to do anything federally, it almost never works. Joe Biden talked more about the minimum wage during a press conference, did a little COVID press briefing. Let's take a listen.
The notion here is we have to act now. There's no time for any delay. And so we can end up with 4 million fewer jobs this year, according to Moody's, a Wall Street firm, and it could take a year longer to return to full employment.
He says we have to act now. There's no time to delay. We got to hurry up and smash small businesses and run people out of jobs. What do you think?
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Oh, sure.
Look, again, 6 million job openings right now. It's not the ideal job opening at Amazon or McDonald's, for example, but that's why you let the private sector do its job. If they can fill those openings, guess what will have to happen? Wages are going to have to go up, right? So that will come from the private sector. There are 10 million Americans looking for a job right now, and you don't want to phase out, let's say, college grads that need entry-level positions, or college interns that need that experience to put on their resume. And that's what's going to happen is you're going to phase out those jobs. They're going to be given to other workers that make a lot more than $15 an hour right now, because it makes more sense to give them more responsibilities and get rid of all the lower paying jobs because they just can't afford it. It will bankrupt small business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Rand Paul earlier this week talked about the ones that are going to be getting hurt the most by this $15 wage would be young minority workers. Explain why.
Right. Well, like I was saying, for example, my husband has a distribution company, a small business here, and to compete with FedEx and UPS and Amazon, they do pay higher than minimum wage in Florida. But if they're already paying $15 or $20 an hour for the warehouse workers and the truck drivers, what happens is when on a federal level, they increase it to $15 an hour, those same workers are going to go to their boss and say, hey, I'm making minimum wage. You need to bump up my pay by $8 because they don't want to make minimum wage. They were making more than that, and they were proud of that. Now those same small businesses can offer that to their employees.
That is really interesting. You know, we've already talked about how it's not going to be that impactful in these big blue states where all the noise is coming from. It's just not. They're already paying about that, and certainly will be by 2025. But what will this do to unemployment numbers in smaller states, in more traditional red states, conservative states, where the wage right now is $7.25? What's it going to do to unemployment?
Well, unemployment is going to skyrocket even further. So again, it sounds like a well-intended policy, But you have 10 million Americans looking for a job. And I'll tell you what else buried in some of these executive orders and COVID relief is the 11 million pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented workers. And good or bad, right or wrong, from an economic standpoint, what that means is these 10 million workers that are unemployed and lost their jobs because of COVID now have a 50% less chance of getting a job because the job pool got so much bigger if you're going to bring in other people from other countries.
Yeah.
We need to take care of our own citizens before we can help others.
You know, if they do get this thing passed, you know, you got to think that if they do, it hurts the economy further. The economy is not going to be in a good position at all by 2022. Politically, it could be a terrible idea for the Democrats.
It is. It's not a winning strategy economically during COVID. It's not a good time to increase taxes, which is never a good time really to increase taxes. And it's definitely not at the time to increase minimum wage. Let's get past the pandemic. Let's get people back to work and keep small businesses open, because those are the ones that really matter. They employ a lot of Americans. And when you drive down the street and see the restaurants closing, the hair salons, the nail salons, the dry cleaners, those people are out of a job.
Yep.
And increasing minimum wage, while it sounds good, it needs to come from the private sector.
Yeah.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.